Juniper by Monica Furlong. Chapter 23. I suppose when we worry about things, it is a way of preparing for all possible disasters in advance. What often seems to happen then is that those particular disasters never occur, but others, undreamed of, do. It was like that in our rescue of Gamal. We tethered our horses in the wood, with Moon in his bag on my saddle. Then, as before, we set off along the tunnel. It felt very different setting off on a dark night instead of on a summer afternoon, and I was glad for my belt, my Doran's cloak, and Uni's amulet. Soon after we entered the tunnel, there was a swish of wings about our heads. We both ducked, thinking a bat was above us. To my astonishment, I saw the great white sweep of Moon's wings instead. He settled on my shoulder for the rest of the journey, clutching me hard when I slipped or stumbled, sitting on my arm when the ceiling got low. It was oddly comforting having his company. We managed the dive, leaving Moon behind in the cave. I solemnly instructed him to wait, and he seemed to understand. Once inside the castle walls, we heaved our dripping bodies onto the bank, removed our cloaks and outer garments, and anointed ourselves with clear water. Then, with the amulet as our guide, we set off again. I could feel my heart thudding. Oddly, though, I felt excited and cheerful, not terrified as I had expected. There was no sign of a guard as we made our way to the western side. Quietly, we opened the door of the antechamber, which was empty. To my relief, no servants lay snoring in the outer room, and no hound was in sight. On through Marut's sinister workroom, and then, much more terrifying, into Marut's bedchamber. The two of us paused in the doorway, ready to run at any moment. If necessary, I thought, we could dash down the stairs into the water and back into the tunnel before they could catch us. But the only sound we heard was quiet breathing. Moonlight lit one corner of the room, the rest was in darkness. Its rays illuminated something, the turquoise collar that the hound had worn, lying on a table as if only just taken off. As I saw the collar there, a hideous smell reached my nostrils, and a piercing realization came to me. What I was reminded of when the gray night looked into my eyes. It was a terrible shock, but I came back to my present errand when Finbar took my hand, and the two of us stole into Gamal's room. Closing the door behind us, we turned to look at Gamal, who was sitting up in bed staring in front of him, exactly as he had been on my other visit. It was terribly uncanny. Did he never sleep? Finbar threw back the covers of the bed, and putting his arms around Gamal, half lifted him out of it. Gamal slipped down until he was crouching on the floor. Finbar and I exchanged frightened glances, but we lifted him up, each slipping an arm through one of his, and without signals or words, we felt so tuned to each other that night that there was no need of them. We began to walk toward the door. Gamal offered no resistance. On the threshold we hesitated, dreading the ordeal of walking through Marut's bedchamber. But I took a deep breath, and we set off again, the three of us walking as one, and without a glance in the direction of the bed, we passed through and into the other room as silently as we had come. By the time we got to the steps, my legs had begun to shake so badly that it was quite hard to keep going. But Gamal needed more help from us there, and I pulled myself together. Finbar and I discussed at length how we would get Gamal into the tunnel. We could do nothing but push him into the water, and with one of us in front of him and one behind, ease him along as best we could. Our great fear was that, not understanding what was going on, he would struggle with us, a nasty prospect in that fast-flowing water. But he did not. In fact, I had a feeling that although Gamal's mind was not with us, his body was responding as well as it could. We pushed and pulled him between us onto the bank in the tunnel. I wrapped my cloak around my wet body and we set off once more along the path. To begin with, I felt much safer, but gradually a hateful feeling of unease spread over me. Soon I traced it to its source, seeing the turquoise collar in the bedchamber and realizing where I had seen the look in the gray knight's eyes. Just then, however, the small, ancient voice of Moon began to speak in my ear. "Run, run, run fast." "Why, Moon?" "He's coming. Run, run." "Who's coming?" "The dog, the dog, the dog." I turned desperately to Finbar, who did not understand Moon's language and heard only owl noises. "Moon says the dog is coming. We must run, Finbar." Finbar must have been tempted to argue with me, but he did not. Together we tried to run, each of us holding one of Gamal's arms. But he was so inert that he slowed us to little more than a fast walk. "We must run, Gamal," I said to him desperately, but I knew my words meant nothing to him. We stumbled over the slippery, sharp rocks, and more than once one of us fell. Yet despite pain and the dead weight of Gamal, we dared not go slower. I was still hoping, as I am sure Finbar was, that it was all a mistake, when suddenly, far behind us, I heard a terrifying bark, and a few moments later the sound of the dog panting and running and snuffling as it leapt over the rocks. A choking, evil smell reached my nose, and it came back to me, the experience of terror in the tunnel that I had known in my flying dream. With mounting horror, I heard the great hound draw closer. His monstrous baying echoed like thunder in the rocky tunnel. Even as I heard the great dog draw closer, I remembered with dismay that in our haste we had forgotten to re-anoint ourselves with clear water when we emerged from the water. What I knew now, had known ever since I saw the collar in the bedchamber, was that the dog was the Grey Knight in his magical form. In the few seconds it took me to think this, I remembered in detail when Truan had told me about how she had been threatened on the road by a huge black dog who was an enemy of Angharad's in disguise. It was terrifying enough to be chased by a huge savage beast. It was much worse knowing that it had human and magical powers as well. The three of us continued at our slow, stumbling pace, though it was clear, at least to me, that we had no hope of outrunning the dog. As the hound drew near, Finbar, in a last desperate attempt to save us, indicated a ledge above the path. Finbar leapt and scrambled onto it, and standing below, I tried desperately to push Gamal up to him while Finbar grabbed Gamal's shirt and pulled on it. The shirt tore and Gamal dropped down on me, knocking my breath out so that for a moment I was helpless. Then, hearing Moon's little voice chant a litany of try again, I seized Gamal, and with a strength that at other times would have been impossible for me, picked him up and lifted and pushed him up toward Finbar. This time Finbar caught Gamal beneath the arms and somehow dragged him up to sit on the ledge beside him. The dog was now very near. The noise it made was deafening. I did not know how to find the strength to scramble up to the ledge. I was trembling so much. Whether Finbar managed to pull me, I remember his arms reaching down to me as my feet slipped, or whether some help reached me from my Doran allies, I do not know. But one moment I was staring up hopelessly, and the next I stood on the ledge beside Finbar. To my surprise, I was suddenly much less afraid. Finbar pulled Gamal farther back on the ledge so that his legs no longer hung down, and I pulled my cloak around me and turned to confront the terror that pursued us. I noticed that my amulet now burned with a clear red light. In the brief time before the dog reached us, when I could see its great red tongue hanging out, its eyes rolling, and hear its baying cries, I reached into my pouch and took Uni's black egg in my hand. Within moments, the suffocating smell of the beast seemed to surround us, so that I thought I would choke. I was aware of it crouching to spring, of its huge paw reaching up to drag me from the ledge, of its claws penetrating my cloak and piercing my leg. At that moment, I threw the egg. Later, Finbar and I had different recollections of what happened next. I thought there was a sort of flash, but Finbar said that the air seemed almost to split open. What both of us watched, unbelieving, was a beast slowly changing into a man, as the black hound became the gray knight. Deathly pale, he tottered on his feet, clutching at his throat as if unable to breathe. He struggled like that for some moments, his face turning blue with the effort, until he collapsed on the ground, rolling to and fro in agony. Grotesquely, the front of his gray tunic was covered in egg yolk, as if I had thrown a perfectly ordinary egg at him. I was so fascinated by the spectacle that I could do nothing but stand and watch. Finbar, however, nudged me. "Let's get away." While the gray knight gasped and struggled and groaned, we lowered Gamal over the edge as if he were a sack of corn, and then, still not taking our eyes off the knight, we too scrambled down. Once more the three of us set off, half running, but this time there was no sound of pursuit, only the sound of Moon's wings as he glided along beside us.